This is the first meeting of this expanded group. And Lee and I talked about the agenda ahead of time and thought it would be good to go around the table and one by one let members talk about, their vision for this group, what you think this group's core values should be, and also what subcommittees you think this group should have. It's going to be very hard because we just meet 2 times a month for an hour and a half each time. The real work of this is going to have to probably be done in subcommittees. That's what we thought about the last time. And what those subcommittees should be in order to implement the results of the criminal justice study and improve the functioning, frankly, of community justice. What those subcommittees are is up to you guys to decide. I'm working with the county as a facilitator. My opinion doesn't matter. Your opinions are what matters. And so we want to hear from you about what you think the vision should be. So I'm just going to turn it over to you guys members. If there's anybody who wants to start. Last time I called on somebody and they're like, I don't want to start. So who wants to start? Do we have a volunteer?
That's why you have to call on someone.
Okay, I'm going to start one here then. And here, to the extent that you come up with some really ideas, or I may be making notes here.
Okay.
Okay?
So, I think the first value we need to consider is the fact that right now our jail does not meet certain constitutional standards. So we need to meet a legal framework.
Okay. So facilities. Constitutional standards for the facility, right?
Well, so I'm not an attorney, nor a constitutional law scholar, so yeah, I know. I haven't got to that yet.
Neither are we. It's all good.
So, all right. So the second thing then I think is that we need to be implementing portions of the sequential intercept model. This is I think this is a scholarly model. I think people that are smarter than me have worked on this. And I think this is part of an evidence-based practice set. And so I think as we're looking at those 2 items, I think that's going to inform how I think about subcommittees. Okay. Should I keep talking or should I pass the torch?
I think you can keep talking.
Okay. So I think that for intercepts 0 and 1, let me back up. Intercept 0, we have a lot of really good work being done in the community with community corrections. We have the Stride Center, we have evidence-based practices in community corrections. Those evidence-based practices include not only the care of individuals, but also an emphasis on equity. And I think that's important to this group as well. I think working with Intercept 1 is then law enforcement. I think we need to think about how we're working with law enforcement. And I think that probably includes the individuals that are working in the jail with Commander Crow and the people that are going to be interacting with those who are incarcerated.
Okay.
Then we get into reentry, and I think that's going to be, that's intercepts 4 and 5 are going to be community corrections again. Maybe the way that we can reduce recidivism, particularly the areas of recidivism that were highlighted in the reports.
Okay. And
then I think we have Intercept 6, which is the one that Eve Hill recommended, and that's more of like society. I think that's where our health department comes in. I think that's where we think about models of justice that can be more community oriented, health oriented, that sort of thing.
Okay, great. That's great. That is a model response. I appreciate that. He talked about facilities. Now, let me ask Peter, would you see a subcommittee of this group working on facility issues?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I think my answer to that is informed by the tours that Commander Crow has organized. Mm-hmm. As we've gone around and have seen other facilities, and as we're going to see additional facilities, I think there's some pretty clear opinions and standards that we can adhere by, and I want to leave that up to the people that are working there. Make sure that people like our staff aren't walking 17 miles a day.
Yeah.
Making sure that they're safe, those sorts of things.
Okay. Okay. Okay, anything else you wanna finish up before we pass the
think-
torch?
I think we should pass the torch.
Okay, and I am going to periodically take pictures, because I'm short and I'm missing the top third of the board, so I'm gonna need the space again probably. Jennifer,
So I think my goal and my vision is for this committee is to obviously, and hopefully work collaboratively together, in tandem with basically all of us are missing puzzle pieces to this table that intersect. But I will say, in looking at this table, I know I said it at last meeting and I'll say it again, is that I feel like we're missing a city voice in this as well. As somebody from, I don't know, from BPD also would be here as well, to be a part of this conversation too, because it seems like county is very well represented, but I do think that in collaboration with this particular facility and what it looks like to reform criminal justice in our community, we need to have that voice as well. And then when I think of reform, I'm also thinking in terms of, a new facility and things like that. I do think that this committee also needs to think about what it means to have a new facility. What does that look like? Oftentimes we've heard in various presentations, Monroe County is, we're, looked at as, the nice shiny button of other different counties. But wouldn't it be really great to take that and put that where our money is? Like what we can reimagine what our facility looks like. I'm not saying that we can't have a facility, because obviously I think we definitely need to have a facility. But I also come from a particular point and in a different voice of, my family has been a part of the criminal justice committee or criminal justice system. I think about what happened to my brother nearly 20 years ago when he was murdered. And I think of family members who are currently incarcerated for something that really truly wasn't violent, but are truly spending a lot of time in this facility. And I think, we can all think about our different clients and the folks that we see on a day-to-day basis and figure out, why are they here? How did they get to this point? And what can we do to refrain them from coming back in, or even coming in the first place? I think that's definitely where my mindset is, maybe others, but in maybe different ways. So I definitely think of how we can do that. And then the biggest thing for me is mental health and substance use disorders. Margie has sent out the article that was in the Herald Times, and I saw a piece in John Oliver, who's a comedian / talk show host, talked about how, mental health facilities are looking as though they are just the core cell, if you will, to hold people who have mental health and substance use disorders. I think the article you sent said 75 to 80% are of those that have those types of disorders. That's a big number. And I think that in terms of what that means is, if we break down subcommittees, I think that would be something that we can work with Commander Crow and looking into that, because I think we also should focus with some of our professionals here as well, decriminalization of mental health and substance use disorders, and trying to fund more of those programs, or have different types of programs that we can have more in our community that would lower that of our percentage of those that are in jail that are from substance use and mental health disorders.
so can I cut you off? Are you saying, when you say decriminalize mental health and substance use disorder and work with with Commander Crow, are you saying, I want to make sure I understand, those programs in the jail, do you also wanna see community programs,
Mhm.
you're seeing both?
Yes.
Programs in the jail plus
Yes.
community programs? Okay. Because, when I hear decriminalize, I'm thinking, have mental health and addictions treatment outside of a correctional center.
Sure.
setting.
Yeah,
Is that what you're
absolutely.
saying?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha, okay. And when you say, what does this look like? Are you also thinking that this committee would inform or recommend, like, kind of a design and what the elements are? How does this committee talk about what the facility looks like? Is that left up to the commissioners and architects, or does this committee have a role?
I think the committee has a role as well, because personally, I don't think we want to have this huge hunk of big facility, by any means, but I think we need to truly think about, what this facility looks like if we're truly working for reform.
Okay. And reform community justice, not just sort of criminal justice, but reform, like, Judge Sacker's gonna talk about, I'm sure evictions and her experience. as
Absolutely.
well.
Oh, I'll be talking about it.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
then just one more quick thing is, in different subcommittees, the other types of people that should be here.
Mhm.
I also think of those that have been previously incarcerated.
That lived
Those
experience.
voices are definitely, should be at the table, and those that are family members that have, or currently that are in, the facility too, because I think what the facility looks like versus, I just have a lot to talk about that, but, I do think that we need to have more community members be a part of this, and obviously in subcommittees as well.
So people with lived experience and family on committees, we would have a facility committee, or at least inform, make recommendations about the facility. Missing, the city, would you see the city, would it be a good place to put some city people on committees,
I would say,
subcommittees?
yeah.
Okay. Okay. Anything you wanted to say you haven't yet got to touch? Okay, great, awesome. I'm trying to write small, so sorry if you guys can't read it. Is there anybody else that wants to volunteer right now because something she said, like, aha, I want to piggyback on that? Anybody? If not, we're just gonna go down the line. Okay.
I'll just round out the council portion of the input here. I also echo the support of including voices from the city administration / Bloomington Police Department. I would go further than just subcommittees. I would put somebody on this body from the city. I think they have enough of a vested interest and experience that we would benefit from their presence. And I also think that someone with lived experience in our jail, in our system, not just any, would be a welcome addition.
On CJRC.
I think so.
Do you want them off, these two, city and lived experience, also in subcommittees too?
The more the
Yeah.
merrier on everything, but those, I'm just wanted to clarify that I thought they should be on this body.
Gotcha. Okay.
No. that's fine.
So COB, do you have an opinion about whether the person from the COB is staff, like staff or elected official administration, like mayor side, or council, or BPD, or do you have any specific thoughts on that? Who is the COB representative?
Well, I think BPD specifically, and I would think that maybe someone from administration or I mean, it almost doesn't matter to me. It's more about who the city would like to have represent their views and perspectives.
Okay. Any thought about any other subcommittees or values or direction?
Lots, but I would like to keep it going, yeah.
Gotcha, okay. All right, who's next? Catherine?
Right, so, I wanna just really start off by saying I really appreciate having all three branches of government here at the same table. I just really appreciate the inclusivity of this committee, and I'm glad to see it continuing in that way. I think we are gonna get a much better result with all of us giving our input, and in fact, other people also bringing in their input. Second, I wanna just say that anything any of the judges say is our own personal opinion, unless we say the Board of Judges has voted and they say. So anything I say today is just blame me, don't blame all the other judges. Similarly for Judge Carthy, although you can smack me if I get it wrong. I wanted to say that from my perspective, civil cases have not been part of the conversation yet in a major way. And I really would like them to be, because just as a criminal record can greatly impact you, a small claims judgment can greatly impact you, an eviction can greatly impact you. We call it the Scarlet E for a reason. Small claims cases can now go up to $10,000. That's real money. We're not at 3,000 anymore. This is huge. They can garnish your wages. They can bring you back to court. The judgment really is supposed to expire after 10 years, but it never does. So having in criminal law, we have Gideon, which means that you have a right to a counsel. In civil cases, you do not typically have a right to an attorney. So a majority of the clients in civil cases are self-represented or self-represented litigants called SRLs, what we used to call pro se. And part of what we need to be thinking about as a community, I think, again, not the BOJ, but just me, is considering we probably cannot afford to provide an attorney for every single person, and the local bar association may have something to say about that, right? But we need to think about how is due process protected when somebody goes into an eviction without an attorney. And we need to be thinking through the consequences of that. We need to be considering that our own county has a health code that says we may create a committee to create housing regulations, but we haven't done that. We don't have housing regulations for the county. So if somebody comes into my eviction court, they get a much different answer in their case if they live in the city versus if they live in the county. So we need to be thinking about these kinds of things. I also want to bring up that while we have intercepts and goals for the criminal side based on the studies that have been done, we don't for the civil side. And there have been 2 studies that have been recently done through exhaustive work through committees appointed by the Indiana Supreme Court. And those, I'm happy to share the results. Those are 1, the Family Law Task Force, on which I was honored to serve, and 2, the Civil Litigation Task Force. Both reports have just come out in the last year and a half. Both are drafted by a wide variety of people in the legal system and participants in the legal system throughout the state of Indiana. And both set out several goals for improving due process in civil and family cases. And both recommend things like a self-help legal center where somebody could go and get some quick legal advice in the justice building, in the courtroom, before they go into their case, even if they can't have a full-on attorney appointed like you would a public defender. So I would love to share those. I think I've sent them to Margie already. I'll be happy to share them. You know, in 2021, where our case numbers were a little bit down still because of COVID, we had 6,500 civil cases filed new. And that doesn't even count the 20-year-old divorce that we're still litigating over because the kids are dealing with college expenses. So that's not just cases, that's just new cases. Family cases never die. I would propose for a subcommittee something focused on civil justice. And I would love to see on that committee local attorneys who commonly represent both plaintiffs and defendants. I think it'd be critical to have a representative from, for example, the Monroe County Apartment Association, as well as people from the District 10 Pro Bono Group, Indiana Legal Services, the Trustee's Office, Middleway House. I deal with a huge number, and so does Judge Carthy, of orders of protection cases and other things like that. We're active on Monroe County Domestic Violence Coalition, but I'd love to see those voices at least at the table for that subcommittee. I also want to just throw out, and again, this is just from me, not from the Board of Judges. I feel like we're on a path where it's being assumed that the courts and the jail will be co-located. And obviously that decision is not up to me. That's up to this group and to the people who are paying for it, which is not me. But I would like to put out hey, let's think more about that before we make that assumption, because I have some concerns about the health of downtown if the courts move because of the number of law firms and offices that are dependent on law firms that would then more likely be considering moving to wherever the courts are. I have a lot of concerns about litigants' ability to get to the court building if they're coming from a shelter or from Middleway House, right now they can get to the court building. And if it's where the land has just been purchased or offered, et cetera, it's gonna be much, much more difficult for them to get there. So that's just, I just wanted to put a pin in that and say that's something to, at least I want to have us have more thought about it. Thank you all very much for the time.
That's awesome. So we've got perhaps use what the state's already done, since
Right.
we haven't done our own study. Use the state's civil litigation task force and melee task force, their results. Consider a self-help center wherever the civil courts-
Recommended by both task
by
forces.
both, okay. And have a so it sounds like you also want to talk about facilities, where they're
Absolutely.
located, what they look
Because
like.
there's a lot I have to say about, when you walk into the Justice Building right now, for example, there's an information desk that is loosely staffed with a person who doesn't have a lot of information to give people. She can tell you what courtroom to go to.
Yeah.
And I would like to see instead you walk in and there's a front desk that says self-help center, and they will help you with picking the right form, signing up for either a free 30-minute advice session with a volunteer attorney, maybe paying a reduced fee to a private attorney to come in through a partnership and having a 2 to 3 hour consultation to be scheduled later. How do you get help getting to Zoom into a court hearing?
Yeah.
All of those kinds of things. Here, you want to file a case? Great. Here are the forms. Now let me show you how to file them.
Well, and that's where things like counsel in the court could be ready right
We,
there.
we have counsel in the court, and that could be built into this model as part of it. And we also have something that's been very successful that we started in 2019, pre-pandemic, called the Eviction Prevention Project. And that has a 3-legged stool model where people come in for eviction cases and they get to talk to an attorney for a few minutes, at least, 5 or 10 minutes. It's better than nothing.
Yeah.
And then they get to go to a mediation with the other side where they can come up with an agreement. And then if they do, we can approve it. And then they don't necessarily end up with an eviction on their record if they agree to voluntarily move out.
And the reason for people who are either watching or at this table, the reason an eviction matters is because you're not eligible for certain kinds of assistance once you have an eviction on your record.
Not only that, but every landlord in the state of Indiana knows to go to my case and look up a person. And if there's been a case against you, they're not going to rent to you when we have a 97% occupancy rate in the county of Monroe.
Okay, so, so that's good. Did I capture everything that you were thinking about?
Oh, probably, but if not, I'll come back to you.
Okay, and, okay, so that's all good. I'm gonna start on this side and then because I worked down a race once I get there. So who else wants to? Julie Thomas. Let's hear from her.
Hey, thanks. I think we need to keep this main committee of 14 as the Monroe County decision makers as we are now. I do hope that we talk about a better time and day to meet for this, newly expanded committee. Here's the way I'm thinking about it. I would love to see a Google spreadsheet somewhere where we can all input some of these ideas about how to proceed and how to get subcommittees going. And I like Peter's idea of focusing on the intercepts, and it's something we can all see and visualize and understand, and adding that 6. But thinking about 3 main categories, this is what I had in mind. Who is being served and who should be served by each intercept, and using that to bring people in from the community to provide information. Who is doing the serving? Who are the service providers, right? So that, for example, if we talk about the construction of a facility, we're thinking about the people who work there. So who serves? And also who is impacted? And this is where we talk about the experience people have, the impact on families of incarceration, on employment, on housing. We do need to talk about transportation. Yes, I agree. We need to talk about facilities and co-location, and some of that's going to be geographical and limiting. We may not even have the opportunity to put everything in one place, so that may be a moot point. But I agree, we need to think through each one of these things. And if we can all think through those intercepts and then think about impact, who serves and who is served, I think we can come up with some great groups and people to invite, and then we can put something out and really just get people engaged from the community, probably in multiple intercepts. And there may be a couple intercepts we can merge together, but I really feel like that would, as long as we keep those three things in mind, I think we're going to have a good target audience for our subcommittees. Thank you.
And that's good. So you're saying don't yet start with the subcommittees. You're saying do a Google spreadsheet, get input from everybody, who is and who should be served, who are the service providers, who is serving, and who is impacted, and what are the effects. You're not opposed to looking at facilities and transportation, but you want to go through this sort of matrix first. After the group's gone through that matrix, then you can engage the community members and do subcommittees. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else?
No, that'll be it for now. I'm sure I've got more later.
Okay. 5 o'clock, so we've been here for a half an hour. We got 1 more hour. I think we're doing okay on time. Did anybody, who wants to go next based on what you've heard? You got something burning in your head?
Yes. Just to follow up on Julie's point, because I agree. For everyone who's new, do you have the Intercept model? Can you put that up so we can see it?
Mm-hmm. I can get it. Okay. Keep talking.
So I had some time to think about the Intercept model, and this is one of the things I wanted to share. I think the Intercept model is a great way to explain how someone is experiencing the process. There is, and once we get it up, it's also, I understand a way of understanding it, but I think if we want to talk about reform, we also need to understand, for those of us who are in the system, those intercepts are not separated out as clearly. So here's the intercept model. So for example, I think when we talk about the intercept model, like in 0, this is before something happens, they make contact with the police. And then we hit intercept 1, and they are making contact with the police. I understand why it's separated out like this, but as someone, when making charging decisions or decisions about a case, all of the information that's happening in each of these intercepts is something that I'm considering. What were the facts right before they made contact with the police? What was their interaction with the police? What services were available? If there is mental health issues, once they're booked into the jail, what services are available in the jail in order to meet whatever needs that might exist? In terms of what courts are available, what's going to happen once they're placed on probation or home detention. All of that information is something I'm taking into account when I'm making a decision. So I think as we talk about subcommittees, I think the intercepts are a helpful way to approach this very large question of reform. But I think we need to be careful not to work in silos, because I think transparency and efficiency and justice goes back to one of the words that Jennifer brought up, and that comes back to collaboration. Mm-hmm. And when Judge Stafford is talking about information, it's talking also about space that we need in the building, how much space, how it's being utilized. So I think subcommittees are invaluable long-term, but maybe as a group, we could even take the intercept approach where we start understanding as a group, what happens when someone calls 911? We just started that with 988. What happens when someone gets booked into the jail? And I think we all need to understand that, because that affects civil as well. And walk through some of those together to make sure that we all understand how we're impacting each other and impacting people in the system.
That's good. So you're taking a kind of process-oriented approach, which is one reason why everybody is now sitting at this table as opposed to just council commissioners. Because we tried to this sequential intercept model is a sequential system, not just 0, not just 6, everything in between. And you're saying in real life it's not separated.
It isn't. For me, as when making decisions, I don't think it's always that clear cut. And one thing I would suggest is I'm happy to, I think for our office, have someone come and follow us at the prosecutor's office, see what a day is in the court, following a public defender to see some of the experiences they're having, because they're actually scheduled in 4 courts and sometimes civil on top of that. I'm sure speaking with the civil judges and seeing what their day is like and some of the space requirements and programming that they need would also help understand what type of facility or long-term building.
While we're on prosecutor, Erica, you two guys, anything else that you wanna say about that?
I think April's gonna serve as my proxy overall. I think I can probably make at least 50% of the meetings because I do want to be engaged. I think it's important, but I think April had some ideas, so I would defer to her to see if she had her goals and values.
Oh, yeah, it's transparency, efficiency, and justice.
Okay.
And with some values, I think transparency includes data that was noted in this survey, in the report. Making sure we have accurate data. I talked about doing a jail tour for the Monroe County Jail for everyone. Intake, making sure all of us are spending time in the court system. And I think-
Transparency, efficiency, and what was the third one?
And justice.
Justice.
Because I think justice encompasses understanding before and after someone makes contact with our system.
Gotcha. I think that's all great. And I think transparency is something that we talk about a lot. And it's a hard nut to crack in a way. Take a picture of it. Because not everything we do is constantly done in a public meeting. There's decisions everybody is making on a day-to-day basis, not in a public meeting. So the operations are going on a day-to-day basis. And how do we bring those actions back to inform the work of this committee? And also, how do we do this work here in public without a shadow government operating behind us that's trying to do the same thing? We just have to be, I think, figuring out how to do that work, but yet bring it back to this table to inform what we're doing here. That's going to be a challenge. Communication is a challenge. I took some pictures of this. I'm going to erase it before we move on. So somebody start thinking about.
I have a question for
Yeah.
April. When you talk about efficiency, because you gave an example for transparency and for justice, for efficiency, are you thinking both within this group working efficiently or efficiency of the systems that we are impacting and developing?
I actually think it's a part of justice. You have people whose lives are being impacted, whether or not be civil or criminal. And when cases go longer, sometimes it's an appropriate resolution, and sometimes those cases need to move quicker. And so I think efficiency within the system. It also means efficiency in communication. If I better understand the policies and procedures, or just mental health is a great example. If I know one of the available resources in the jail of, can someone see a professional and receive their medication? Are there any challenges in making sure gaps in medication? How much are they given when they're released from the jail? Some of those, understanding those things, efficiency in terms of communicating and everyone understanding what that information is, will help us make decisions quickly and that are accurate.
Thank you.
I would just chime in to say that everyone is welcome to come observe almost any court hearing at any time. The dockets are all available online, and I'm happy to send you that link. I was thrilled to have Margie sit in on evictions a couple weeks ago. Please feel free to come in. You can watch it on the monitor behind me. I still have most of mine by Zoom because of COVID, or I can give you the link and you can log in anytime. Yeah. The only ones that are confidential are sometimes name and gender marker changes or some particular kinds of chins or guardianship cases.
It was good too to see how closely the criminal system and the civil system are interacting.
Absolutely.
I'll also point out that in the Ken Ray report, he pointed out that efficiency is something we need to work on as well.
Yeah, and they also talked about case management.
Sure did.
In terms of data, like knowing what are our standards, like what are our times, and how is that comparing to a state and national level. And maybe having we talk about wanting to have some specific action items. Maybe we could have the people who are already working on data. And I know that this is something that Miriam Baumert is working on. And I know that, people are working, Eric, who's working with your office, those two consultants were together and have created sort of a dashboard, perhaps a public facing dashboard might be some sort of a specific action step, perhaps.
I would just chime in there as well with the Civil Litigation Task Force and the Family Law Task Force, case management standards, those kinds of cases are in those reports.
Okay. And
we collect data in Quest through community corrections and.
yes,
Yep.
we just heard some great information at the Community Corrections Advisory Board /JRAC about the data that they're collecting. And I know, Mim, who's here in the former, said we are collecting some jail data as part of her work. I don't know how much jail data. So finding that out and sort of having a centralized justice database, is that kind of not heads nodding?
We're limited in what data we can track because of Odyssey. So we can only track.
Wasn't one of the recommendations that maybe you needed a different system?
That is mandated by the Indiana Supreme Court. So that is above our pay grade to be able to change.
Pull our own data, like locally, right, and give it to somebody who's created a national for us.
If it were tracked in the first place, and
yeah.
Okay.
That's the challenge. I love data. I love going to ICOR and trying to look up data on cases, but it's difficult. And just as one example, on a family law case, it may have been the original divorce was in 2002.
Yeah.
And it's come back 6 times since then. So how long did it take me to close the case? Well, which time? When is the start date? It's all one case number.
Okay.
They did also recommend that we work closely with the state to try to make some big changes.
Be thrilled. But yeah, that's from Chief Justice Rush. We don't have the ability to change that.
Okay. Okay, that's helpful. Good follow-up questions. Any more on that?
Sorry, just last one.
Yeah.
Efficiency, Kate. The other thing too is, I think when we start talking about reform, there are so many different components to it, and I think the discussion can get really big. I think it's really important that we focus on the report to be as efficient as we can as a committee, especially, I don't think I can draw enough attention to the one that talks about the jail facility, which is in need of some structural changes. And I know that puts the jail in a really difficult place. Specifically, the jail facility is incapable of consistently ensuring and sustaining constitutional levels of inmate care and custody. So I think addressing that, because every day that we're not addressing it, there's still people in that jail right now.
Sure.
And I think that needs to be efficient and a priority as we move forward.
So, and that echoes exactly what Peter started off with. And, you know, when we were talking with consultants, we said, don't hide it, man, tell us the truth so that we know what we're working on. Go ahead.
And to that point, at the last county council session, we started the ball rolling on an 87-acre plot of land that we're hoping to, do something with in terms of this facility. So, we're still waiting on environmentals, we're still waiting on other legal considerations, but 87 acres is going through the process, and we're going to fill it with something.
And can you help me? One of the meetings we talked a little bit about how transportation has their own contracts. So in order of getting someone to be able to reach a facility for busing or transportation, is that part of the process, or is that later in the process?
So I think a lot of, I will speak to kind of what I know is that Bloomington Transit is its own entity.
Okay.
So it's not an entity of the city, it's not an entity of the county, it's its own entity. And they have their own strategic plan. They have their own council that they retain. And I think that's a conversation that we're going to need to have. Certainly that might be a stakeholder that we're going to need to pull in. We might want to pull in.
Thank you.
I think we could say that that's where we should certainly start. And if that doesn't work out at all, we do have other options within the county to provide transportation in one way or another. And that might be what we would want to explore if this option didn't work out. If we do buy this property, I don't think we should settle on the idea that this is property that we will be using.
Yeah.
That's
We're
correct.
exploring
That's correct.
using it at this point. Thank you.
And also back to Bloomington Transportation, that entity was, as Peter says, is a different, separate legal entity, get their own money. They do have a board that's appointed by some city members. or the city appoints them, and however, the city council has the legal authority to expand the boundaries of Bloomington Transportation right now. If they wanted to, they can, now obviously funding is always the problem, but they could expand the boundaries, that's by city council by legislation. So to the extent that getting to a new facility is outside city boundaries, that could be fixed by the city council passing legislation to expand the boundaries, assuming that there was money.
But to be clear, this particular location is within the city boundaries.
It is,
Yeah.
it is. And there isn't currently bus line going there because there's nothing there. But
there's
I
a
should
hospital.
imagine once things are there, the city would decide that they should run bus line to it.
Okay.
There's a hospital here though.
Yeah, yeah, there's
I mean, to say nothing's there, it's letting
I
off
think
the
the
hook.
hospital is in the county.
Ah.
And,
So it's across the street.
yeah.
Still would be handy to have a bus there.
so, Lee or Lori or Michael, Carol, Darcy, anybody want to jump in here?
I can add something to what April said.
Oh, go ahead, Sarah.
Just about problem solving courts, which I haven't heard any discussion of that yet. We do have 4 in Monroe County and it's Judge Deepak, I think is doing all of them.
Yeah.
But if anybody wanted to come observe problem solving courts, because when I was a public defender, Eric and I were on the drug treatment court team, and there's a lot of, evidence-based practices applied to those courts that show that, in general, when someone's in drug court, I think you're not supposed to keep them incarcerated for more than, 3 days, because once you're incarcerated more than 3 days, then it starts sort of a downhill spiral of, job loss of housing, family trauma to families of people incarcerated. So.
Is there any way?
I remember that number
track
being
how many
6
people-
days.
Oh, Erica says 6 days. Okay.
Okay.
It's been a few.
But it isn't that many. I
Yes.
mean, and yeah, it's for the reasons Kara says, it starts to have a like downward impact on their progress and success in the program.
Who's keeping track of that? Who's keeping track of like, hey, Margie's been in the jail for 7 days? she's
Probation department.
Okay, so probation is one.
It's
keeps
in
track of that?
Quest. Yep.
Okay, so probation, so they would have that done.
Mhm.
Okay. And I got the 4 courts. Are these our 4 problem solving courts? Mental health,
Yes.
court, veterans and family.
Not family, it's,
Reentry.
reentry. Yeah. In fact, family courts have been recommended by the Family Law Task Force as a family problem-solving court, looking at the interaction between things like substance use disorder, eviction, criminal actions, and CHINS cases, and how to take a proactive approach to the whole family.
Yeah.
And we do not yet have in Indiana a family court problem-solving model. We have a CHINS dependency court family model that several counties have established, including Bartholomew County, but we do not yet have that in Monroe County. So we do not have any civil problem-solving courts at this time.
Okay, so maybe we'd have to work with the state to do that, but add. the
Yes,
family
and
one.
that's a longer discussion.
Got it, okay. Sam had his hand up.
Yeah, we talk a lot about the inmates and their constitutional rights. I think we also need to talk about the staff. The jail, although it's on the 4th and 5th floors, a thin house, it is a dungeon. I was talking to one of my officers today. If you want to make a cup of coffee, the coffee pot's on the north end of the building, the water's on the south end of the building. You want to wash your hands before you get something out of the refrigerator, we have 3 bathrooms, the entire jail. 2 of them are in control rooms, 1 of them's on the south end of the building. So I think we need to think about things to help the staff out, to make them feel a little bit more comfortable.
Okay.
And retain, good
Yeah.
quality
And
staff.
retain staff. So I think that's really important. And then there's been a lot of other good ideas in here. You had some wonderful ideas and some wonderful things. And I think with the Intercept, based on how it's handled in one Intercept, it affects how it's taken care of in the other Intercepts. So we have to be able to collaborate, communicate, and work together. And I think that's something that we really don't do a very good job of within the county, is working together. So I think that should be a goal.
Love it.
And your idea of having the space, I wanna come talk to you. Cause I
Anytime.
think that's something that we need to start in jail.
I think the jail could have a mobile version of that.
Yes.
Maybe we have an arrangement for especially people who are, you know, of appropriate safety to come down one day a week and have those consultations. The judges would be thrilled because then they wouldn't be filing random lawsuits that don't make any sense, or at least less so.
Well, and the inmates will ask us for
Right.
paperwork.
And you don't know what to
I'm an
give them.
attorney.
Right. It puts all of our staff in a bind when we don't have a self-help center, because jail staff are being asked this, court reporters are being asked this, the clerk's office employees are being asked this, and they can't give legal advice.
Is part of that too, having mobile advocates, so we always talk about meeting people where they are.
Sure.
So.
I've talked a lot about a divorce van that would take a group of law students and volunteers and attorneys and go around and help people file for whatever they want. Maybe we call it a civil justice.
Yeah, I
van
don't think
instead.
that's too severe.
It's like a Scooby-Doo looking van.
Yeah, like a bookmobile. It's a courtmobile. It's a courtmobile, that's a better word.
Okay, the courtmobile. Our insurance rates are gonna go up.
Not staffed by the District 10 pro bono project, because their malpractice insurance would cover it. The judges aren't gonna be there giving legal advice.
Well, remember that district courts got or circuit courts got their name because judges used to travel a
Right.
circuit to where
Yep.
the people were. And so one of that does remind me of something Eve Hill said, like, don't get so hung up on your bricks and mortar. Think about person-centered planning, think about meeting people where they are, think about being flexible, because when you put it over here in this one fixed location, you have trouble, everybody can't get there. You're kind of stuck. So do think about flexibility. So I'm gonna add that word here.
We have a tremendous resource in the law school being here in Bloomington.
Yep.
And they were on my list of potential subcommittee members for civil justice, but there's no reason that they shouldn't be on other subcommittee lists as well. A lot of my goals for creating the eviction prevention project model and expanding it to small claims and family law is bringing in law students under the appropriate supervision of an attorney to help with some of that process for maximum efficiency.
Well, we have student legal services and other clinics over
But
there.
that's not the same thing. No, not at
No.
all.
Okay.
I'm talking about bringing in certified law students who are in their third year to help with some of the legwork under the supervision of an attorney. Very different than student legal, which has
So-
students as their client.
So who would be supervising these people?
Not a judge, somebody outside the legal system, but we could help create that model. Like in the Housing Eviction Prevention Project, we initially hoped to bring them in, but the tenant assistance project died when Professor Prusak left the law school. But prior to that, we had law students coming in and helping tenants under the supervision of a professor. For example, it could be a clinic where the students get academic credit for doing the work.
Tenant assistance project.
So it
Exactly.
could be a clinic. It could be a clinic.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just gonna say, I think that maybe we're getting awfully specific, and a lot of these things are things that should be discussed more in subcommittees.
Subcommittee, I can
and
subcommittee.
worked through, although, I mean, that might not be the best model.
Yeah, and I think there's a challenge between that sort of thinking big, broad picture and the specifics. And there's that tug and pull. I've heard a lot of people say, hey, you guys aren't making enough progress. You haven't had specifics. And then, but it's hard to have the specifics when you still don't know the direction we're headed. So there's a tension that we're definitely battling, for real. But I think, okay, so who has, Sam, did you have anything else you wanted to add before you go, before we move on?
Not that I can think of right now.
Okay, and we have Lee, and we have Michael, and we have Lori. And Julie has your hand up. Julie, do you want to go now, or do you want to let the other, do you want to wait for a
It's
second
just
round?
still up, I think.
Oh, let them go. It's okay. I'll wait.
Okay, who wants to go next? Lee?
I would like to, because, and I'll have to admit that I have been thinking again along totally different lines. I am not actually involved in the criminal justice system at all. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not thinking about any of this stuff in the way that most of you are. My vision was actually very broad, that we would adopt a policy of harm reduction in everything that we're doing. And also, make sure that we're reform oriented rather than punishment oriented. And I think that a whole lot of what people have said are just the details involved in there. So I'm glad you guys have heard details. I think that it's going to be extremely important to have a lot of collaboration. I think that can be most effectively done in the subcommittees, because we're going to be dealing with such a broad area of ideas that a lot of it is going to be irrelevant to any particular participant, I guess. And so I think many people would feel that they would be more relevant in the subcommittees than in one huge committee. But that's just how I view it. I very much think that using the Intercept model is the way to go. I think that as well as just working through the different intercepts, Eve actually gave us a number of particular tasks with each intercept that she saw as making a big difference. I think probably we're going to end up thinking beyond that, but I think that's a good way to get started. And I think that we should think of this in terms of something that's evolving, and that we aren't going to be able to set everything in stone right away. I don't want to be overly focused on the facility. The facility is an incredible need that we really must deal with, and I'm very anxious to deal with it. But criminal reform is going to take a whole lot more than just the facility. So I don't want to get overly hung up on what the facility is going to be. I want to think of reform in much broader terms.
So let me ask you that. Should there be, in your mind, is there a facility focused and a reform focused, and are those separate, or are they together?
Well, I think they need to inform each other.
Okay.
You know, I think we're going to find as we move along that everything we're trying to do connects with all kinds of other things. But I think because of the urgency for the facility, it's overshadowing other aspects of reform. And if we let that happen, then once we have the facility, I'm afraid we're likely to just say, okay, we've done it. Okay. And any idea of true ongoing reform will be lost.
That touches on some things that I've heard other people say. I've heard people say, I don't want to just focus on a facility to the exclusion of everything else, like building mental health treatment in the community, or focusing on health. Yeah. So you're saying work on both, and they're overlapping, and they'll have to inform one another. It's evolving. One of the things I've been thinking about is, how is the county going to sustain this work long term? You're not going to hire a consultant forever to do this. So how are you going to build the infrastructure in-house to prioritize these long term? Don't have an answer for that. Harm reduction, is that the same as health focus for you?
Not entirely, because I think it also involves things like evictions. That's something that does a whole lot of harm to the person who's being evicted. I think that harm reduction is when the justice system is acting in such a way that it unnecessarily makes people's lives worse.
And I wasn't thinking health department, I was thinking overall health.
No, I understand, because at the same time, I think that we should always, I think county government as a whole should think about health in most of the decisions we're making. Yeah. But when I talk about harm reduction, I'm talking about the drunk kid who won't give the officer his name, so the officer puts him in jail.
Right.
That is not necessary.
And I was thinking about that conversation, that was had about like every, focusing policies in terms of a health focus. There was some conversation, I think a couple months ago about that. And I think it came out of the Community Voices for Health project that is also overlapping with this work. Okay, anybody, I'm gonna erase this here in a sec. I'm gonna, unless somebody wants to have this up there for the memory. Because I've got,
We're hoping you're gonna send us.
I am, I would say yes, but I wanna make sure I have more room to write, so I'm taking pictures so that I can write. Who's going next while the teacher's erasing this? Anybody else ready to go? Yeah, you wanna say something?
I would, if it's appropriate. I introduced myself as a visitor. I certainly need to identify myself as a newcomer, and you'll see that in what I want to what I'm about to say. I agree very much with what Lee said, and it ties in, I think, with a lot with what Jennifer was saying. And I have some thoughts along those lines, but I would like to go back to facilities, sorry to say, because I have one comment. Again, I'm a newcomer, so please give me the right to speak unrealistically, and please inform me. But so Peter's comments stimulated some things that I wanted to suggest, and I hope Commander Crow will appreciate what I'm about to say. But in reading the Ray and Hill reports and other documents, other input, the challenge is daunting to meet the needs of the communities, the community people that you serve. And so I would like to make a comment about facilities, perhaps before we go too far down the road and block ourselves in a way that might constrain us later on. But again, this may be wildly conservative, wildly unrealistic. We're talking, what's on the table right now is the possibility of renovating the existing facilities. And well, I think along with the prospect.
Can I stop you real quick? We already shut down Ken Ray's idea of renovating.
Okay, good.
Yeah, that's not happening.
Well, if one could have thought about renovating those facilities for special needs, and of course building the new site to address special needs and the general kind of public in general. But in thinking about this a bit, and actually in conversation with a friend who's a former state policeman and then Department of Justice official involved in some related activities, we sort of wondered, again, this is the out of the box kind of thought, but I'm very aware that you have responsibility for very difficult cases, people who have really protracted, almost we don't want to use the word intractable, but nearly intractable kinds of problems. Are those the kinds of problems that should be addressed locally? What about advocating for a model of regional centers that are especially designed to meet the needs of inmates who are profoundly mentally ill, profoundly addicted to substances, and particularly violent criminals? Is it unrealistic for us to expect that using our new facility, or even if we were using renovate, now I understand that's not to happen, but even if we were to try to use both local facilities, is that even reasonable? And it goes to the values Peter raised of maintaining constitutional expectations and meeting the needs of your staff, but also meeting the needs of inmates as well.
So I'm gonna That's good. I'm gonna write that down as consider who is in the jail. And perhaps, and I think regional centers is something the state has actually brought up as an idea. And we've had, and that is something I think to think about. I've heard some local pushback on that. But I actually want to pivot from you, Michael. I'm gonna put you on the spot. If I can, as the public, as chief public defender, representing the people that, and you guys have, your office has a high number of the cases, right? The people that are in the jail, you guys represent those. So do you have a thought on that at all? About the facility, about this? What are your thoughts?
Whether it should be regional.
Whether we, can we deal with special needs cases differently, not here locally? Can we deal with them somewhere else? I'm wondering your thoughts about the facility and our priorities and that particular topic. And if you're like, hey, I don't have an idea or I don't want to share it, whatever.
No, as I understand it, the report says we need a new jail. So that's what we should consider. Whether we modify the entire other system, we've talked about that for 40 or 50 years, and we have groups like this. And we pay consultants to come in and tell us, okay, we should do this, and you can do this. We get everybody together. Then they say, well, we can't vote because we have elected people, and some judge or sheriff says, I don't want to do that. Then they just stop the whole thing. You can vote all you want. If they say they're not going to do it, they're not going to do it. So you can, that's admirable to try to fix the system, but it becomes, you need a new jail. And now how, some years ago we bought, 90 acres down there, and we got another consultant team. We paid them a bunch of money. They designed a campus.
Yep.
Because we were gonna put juveniles and mental health and work release in a jail. And finally, we got the bill and everybody said, we don't have that. And so it comes down to money. It almost always. If we've talked before about putting mental health people, sending them to the hospital, well, then the hospital has to decide, do we have a team that can look at these people and where are we going to put them if we think they should stay in? We don't have a place in the hospital, or they may have one jail cell. So you need to involve the hospital. If you're talking about police agencies, you need to involve more than just the sheriff and the city. You need to involve Ellisville. You need to involve the state police. You need to involve IUPD, because if they say, we're not going to do that way, then you're just out. I mean, just are. So, and that becomes, if you get all those people on a committee like this, it's unmanaged. You can't have that many people.
Right.
So, they had regional mental health facilities.
Yeah.
The state did away with them.
What, for good reason?
Well, yes,
Yeah.
it's good reason, but it's also state money. That's
Yeah.
So you have to come up with who's going to pay for these. Is the state? Are the regions going to pay for them? Are the individual counties going to pay for them? I don't know. The other thing that involves is if we have people in those institutions, then we have to go see them.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
you can Zoom, but that doesn't work good. So you have to go see them, and if you want them before a judge, you either have to Zoom it or bring them here. That involves transportation. So I don't know the answer to all that, but I think you should work on it. If it's already decided we're going to build a new jail, then you need to kind of concentrate on that. What are we going to do?
So concentrate on that. That is sage advice. And one of our county council members just sent us the book that was written about a PhD student did a dissertation on this effort, and he's now teaching Eastern Kentucky. And I think you guys have a link if you want to buy that book. I bought his 2 books and I'm working through this one. And essentially, in a nutshell, it is just saying you're going to build a campus and do this new way is it's the same game, a new name, and you're just sort of you're not really changing your model. Yes. You say focus on a new jail, and you also say include the hospital, law enforcement, all these branches of law enforcement. Would you see these guys on subcommittees?
Yeah, I don't think you can have 80 people here in one committee, it doesn't work.
Okay,
This is.
okay. So do you think subcommittees actively working between our two meetings and then reporting back might be a good way? You don't care, okay. Who's gonna pay, always the big issue here. And I think that's important. We have been talking about this for a long time, and that was one of the topics that Laura Lane was writing about recently. It's like, hello, I've been reporting on this for 20 years. What are you people doing?
Well, the other thing is, that, you know, we worked, I don't know, 2 or 3 years because we had a facility to do a work release. Out.
Yeah.
It was there, and we decided the county could buy it, do bonds and things. What happened? We couldn't staff it. There wasn't enough money to hire enough people to staff it.
Yeah, it was a good, Joyce Pullen was commissioner at the time. I was counting the train. We could buy it pretty easy, or they were gonna give it to us, but we didn't have the operational costs.
Right.
Thank you for that, Lori. I'm using green. I'm using green because your name is Lori Kelly.
Oh, okay.
And like Kelly Green, okay? So Lori, you wanna tell us your thoughts? And Sam, I'll get back to you. I saw your hand raised. Unless it's real quick. You wanna say it real quick?
Just about a regional area.
Yeah.
The inmates are the responsibility of the sheriff. So if you make a regional campus someplace, who's in charge of the inmates? Who's in charge of the cost of medical care? What if somebody is injured? What if someone dies? I don't think any sheriff would want to take on the responsibility of inmates, especially the worst inmates in the jail, being put in a regional area. So I think that's totally out of the question.
I did hear that idea from somebody else who's a criminal justice professor as well, of like, hey, and those liability issues and whose liability is all done through a contractual arrangement. Like, hey, you're gonna take, these are what you sign up for, this is what you don't sign up. That's the lawyer's right. And that's what, you use to hold up when you say, hey, it's on you, man. You took that when you signed that contract. Lori.
Yes. So I don't know that I have a real in-depth or good summary kind of my thoughts, but I have just some things that have come to mind to me through this conversation and just, hearing more from everyone else. In my mind, I guess, with my background and just my thought, I'm thinking of like a health-focused framework that's collaborative efforts. I think that it would be really important for everyone to be open-minded. Transformative changes, and that's for, again, longevity.
When you say longevity, is that the same as saying like how we're going to sustain this work?
Right.
Okay.
So taking the time and the attention to really looking at the details, collaborating well, and figuring out how, just to sustain the efforts long term, not quick fixes or quick solutions, but really those transformative changes for the community.
When you say a health-focused framework, can you elaborate a little bit more what you mean?
Well, I think looking at the different areas of health, and then if we're talking about subcommittees, for example, or looking at behavioral health, mental health, substance abuse, then really getting into details of those key areas and addressing those from a smaller focus, but then how does that fit in with looking at it from that macro lens?
Okay. So one of the things I want to point out to everybody is that the report spoke a lot about addiction and mental health, both these reports. And part of the community health improvement plan that the health department is already working on has a substance abuse and mental health subcommittee that brought in Centerstone, licensed social workers who are providing treatment here. Trying to think who else was on it, but you already have a committee going.
Yes.
It was informed by a whole county-wide community health process where people from the community said, what are the top 10 issues? And they narrowed it down to 3, and none of those with substance and mental health. The committee met for the first time today. Rather than reinvent the wheel, it may be that we want somebody from this committee to start working with that subcommittee, because they already they were like, okay, who's at the table, who needs to be at the table that's not here? Their focus is mental health and substance abuse. I would suggest that that might be a good way. Do you want to talk about that at your committee at all?
Sure. So, I mean, I think it's just different key players kind of in the community coming together, having those different experiences to say, how can we each work together with our experiences and with our backgrounds to come up with, you know, good solutions. Talking a lot about, you know, the access and how do we, you know, fix some of those problems. But really looking at, it was interesting to get all of the different perspectives. I think that it's just going to help make more informative decisions about what really are these issues.
And there were a couple of people, I sat in on that because when I went to the Community Health Improvement Plan meeting that was in Fountain Square Mall, that was the subcommittee I signed up for, largely because I'm on the Community Voices for Health project, but that was an area of focus. I knew that would be coming up here, so I want to hear about what was said. But you did have a couple of people with lived experience on that committee too.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else you want to share?
Well, I mean, I think these are some of just my kind of perspectives coming in kind of new, looking from the outside. Even during the interview process, I'm looking and I'm kind of digging into the details and I'm going, well, what about mental health? That's such a huge issue. Like, what is the health department doing to address that? How are they working to help people get connected with those resources? So to me, I could see a gap that, in my opinion, looked like it needed to be filled. And I think that that is just one of, you know, one of the pieces to these problems when we're talking about the criminal system.
Thank you. Now Julie's been waiting patiently to say something else. Julie?
Yeah, 2 things real quick. I also want to remind everyone that the state is supposed to be addressing mental health issues at next year's legislative session. So, you know, who knows what will come out of that. I know we can't rely on it, but we also need to be aware of that. I think it was really interesting to hear, and this is why I raised my hand, the idea of, oh, come and see what we do and see how we work. Well, we can't all do that, and the public can't do that. So I wonder if in subcommittee process, we can have that brought to the public's attention and our attention. I think we all need to be educated on that process, but we all can't sit through courts and bookings and prosecutorial decision-making and public defender decision-making, and certainly the public won't have the opportunity to do that. And I think we could all learn a lot if we could have some sort of tutorial or something brought to us or to subcommittees so that we can all learn what we need to know. But this is all going to inform those suggestions about we need space for, you know, as Sam was pointing out, you know, how things are set up and how the facility is set up. And I think that's why I talked about who is being served, who is doing the serving, and who is being impacted as ways to think through where we need to gather information. Thank you so much.
So, okay, so from here we've got 10 more minutes, and we've got these ideas, but I want to sort of walk away with some thoughts. I've heard a lot about a facility committee. Now, speak now and tell me if there, and I'm gonna address this to the commissioners. Oh, I knew what you were gonna say. I'm reading Angie's mind, and let me see if I got this right. The commissioners are in charge of facilities.
I wasn't gonna say
We're
that.
gonna say that, but I do think that we have to remember that. I was writing a list of subcommittees, and when I wrote facilities, I said with the full and complete understanding that the commissioners are in charge of facilities. So this has to be recommending to them what is built. What were you gonna say?
I was actually gonna say that, if you're looking at creating a subcommittee, why don't we wait? Because I've got the signature for both the sheriff and,
Oh, yeah.
the president of the board of commissioners for the, National Institute of Corrections. So their phony program. So, once we can get that kind of established, they're willing to come down and actually assist us in going through the processes of what we need to be looking at. So instead of trying to recreate the wheel, create a wheel that we already know we're trying to create, let's get people in here who nationally are doing it.
And the National Center for State Courts also has architecture, design, court, layout services. They have articles, they have people who will come and help, for all of that, for the courtroom side of it.
Yeah.
National Center for
State Courts.
State Court, okay, and would you guys see a committee working on both correctional and, I mean, would they sort of tackle courts and?
Might be easier to separate them, but that's up to wiser minds than mine.
I would think it'd be easier to separate them. I think we start to muddy the water.
Okay.
In my opinion.
One, okay, and tell me, are they gonna, I've heard that this group might be thinking about, cause it's on their website, says you have 4 people, are they gonna let us have more than 4?
I haven't had an opportunity to ask them that because I've been on the signed letter. However, once I get that uploaded with them, then I'll be able to talk to them more directly and see just exactly what it is they're looking for and what they're willing to do. My interpretation of things is that they're pretty willing to meet whatever our needs are, but if the group gets to be too big, that becomes a problem.
So just make sure I understand, so the commissioners and the sheriff have already signed a contract or a letter saying that they wanna do it?
That they're interested and would like to have their assistance.
Okay, so that is something, and then so that would be essentially a subcommittee that could report back to this larger group? Is that what that would be? Okay. All right. Any thoughts, reactions, conversations out there?
I'd just like to bring up the fact that when it does come to facilities, probably one of the first decisions that needs to be made before anything can go forward is just how big a facility are we looking at building?
Do you mean number of beds?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is a pretty concrete thing, and we can look at it in a number of different ways, but I think that before much of anything can be done, we need to make a decision along those lines.
And is that a philosophical decision? Here's why I asked that. Is that I want to keep the number the way it is now because I don't want to build it and they will come versus, and maybe, or I want to stay at the number but have room to add another pod and expand it? Is that more of a philosophical or is that a practical conversation?
Combination.
Yes.
I think it's a
Yeah, it's
combination
both.
of both.
Okay.
And I think different people probably have different ideas about what is most efficient and makes most sense. I think, I think I can speak for the commissioners and say that none of us are interested in building a jail of the size that was recommended, but probably are interested in having space to expand it.
And that is easy enough to do. That's easy enough right now to do. I think if you have the land and you design it in a way that you can create another pod should you need it, you also could build it with the idea that if you can reduce it and you don't need that pod anymore, you can repurpose it for something else, which would be ultimately the goal. Sam?
When we go to Hamilton County,
Mm-hmm.
it'll give you a good example of what the possibilities are.
Okay.
Because they've added on bed spaces, the outside facade, but then they left one portion where they could add on another 125 beds or something like that at a later time.
Mary?
Yeah. Yeah.
just consider-
Margie, that's okay, I go by everything.
Margie, I'm sorry, my
Maggie, or whatever. go
I
ahead.
have to be careful how I proceed from this
Yeah,
point on.
sure.
Because I'm not the sheriff, so I'll make that crystal clear. But if I was,
Ruben Marte, by the way.
I thought everybody knew you, okay, Ruben Marte,
Yeah.
state police. One of the things that's just Sam just said, as far as the Hamilton County Jail, I asked the superintendent for the state police to come down and talk to this group if you choose to. Hear him, and he's willing to do it. Two reasons why. One is he built that jail and was the sheriff there for 8 years. Number two, once he finished his term there, he was asked by the consultants who worked for them, because the jail was such, it was built with such efficiency. So if you could see it and visualize it, it probably give you a better idea. Because at the present time, what I'm hearing right now is that everything that I've heard right here, right now, talking to division people in Bloomington is a very good idea. For example, that organization that's right across from the jail, Stride. When I met with Stride is just what, 3 people? That's small, but it's a good beginning. But when I talked to the president of Pete, the president of Cook, how is this going to sustain itself? He has some ideas, but it actually has another year left.
Yeah.
That's right.
Right.
So if that is the case, and this is great, don't get me wrong. But when I took the tour of the jail, that's the urgency, immediacy, and I agree with Michael. Is it Michael? I'm learning all these names, so I apologize. If what I heard was correct, that this was discussed years ago,
40, 50.
Yeah.
and we're here now. I wasn't around then, so whatever mistakes was made back then, we needed to make sure we repeat it now, because it will catch up again. Okay, that's what I'll say on that. As far as the facility itself, and I know people cringe when we talk about size, but the size is not for the beds. The size is to have multiple programs in the facility.
Yeah.
When I met with New Leaf, New Life, you know, that's a small group as well. Stride is a small group. Big Brother's a small group. I'm missing a whole bunch of other programs that are so spread out, but it's not encompasses a one-stop shop. If we could succeed, do that, that is great. Now, I'll finish with this. The reason why I'm saying what I'm saying is because I have the luxury of traveling throughout the state and meeting multiple sheriff departments, multiple. And I can tell you the ones that work really well, the ones that do not work well, just by the mere fact of walking in and seeing what you see on people that are treated, and how the inmates talk about the jail itself, okay? Because I talk to them as well. And one of the things that's common denominator is that if the ones that are very successful are the ones that have all the programs right there, hopefully they don't get there, because this is what this group is trying to accomplish, and that's phenomenal, okay? Both can be done at the same time. New jail and what you're doing here is great. But if they do get into the jail, our whole job at that given time is to make sure before they leave that we give them every opportunity not to come back again.
Yeah.
Okay. So another the organization that I forgot to mention was Howard. That was another issue. And also Sunstone. And Sunstone said to me, one of the problems that we have with the jail is no offense to you, Sam, because you do what you have to do with what you have. But when a person goes in there and they have 7 medications, and we don't know what medication they're on, because we just don't know.
Right.
And we put them on something else. Now it's just like the whole circle again. So what I'm hearing is a bunch of big pieces of the puzzle that we have not sat at the table like this and put it all together and see who is going to do what and how we're going to give it up the actual responsibility, because it's doable. For an agency to deal with so many different things as the state police does, I can assure you it could be done. However, if we repeat the same mistake from the past, I'm sorry, it's just not going to work.
Yeah.
So, in my humble opinion, but again, I am not the sheriff.
No, I think that's great. And what you're talking about is something we talked about, a continuum of care. It would be lovely if you didn't have to fall off your medications as soon as you got in the jail.
That's
if
what
there was some clinic, you know, we used to have volunteers in medicine, now we have Health Net. It's doing street outreach and there's some clinics. So how do we make sure that from a health perspective, we are sharing, at least have, and I know there's HIPAA and there's releases and all that sort of stuff, but how do we try to keep the person on this solid sort of healthcare.
What other jails have done is they have a mini clinic within the jail with staff.
Yeah.
That have by Indiana statute, that as a doctor, they could contact wherever they were released from, or wherever they were speeding for. For us, it'd be easy. Send us, we just go to Center to find out. I can't get that information, but another doctor can.
Sure.
That would be right there, side by side with us, and that'll take care of that particular part.
Right. And we, I like to remind people that the county council's been very generous in terms of budgeting for mental health and physical health in the jail. And so, making sure that those dollars are well spent and that we're getting the bang for our buck. I think that's important. Now, tell me this, you said something I want to follow up on. You mentioned about having this the Indiana State Police Superintendent come down to talk to us. That's something Angie has mentioned too. This time is precious. We have 3 hours a month together. Do you want that done in part of this meeting, or would you want to do that as a separate meeting, or thoughts, Kate?
Well, I was actually going to suggest that it be part of this meeting. And when Julie was mentioning the resource that she mentioned, that now I can't even remember, but she was saying, generally speaking, instead of job shadowing, because some of us can't do that we become informed here on site in some way. And I feel like that's something this whole group could benefit from, rather than just in the subcommittees, and that education component keeps us all able to take that information back to the subcommittees. Anyway, that I've been kind of sitting on that, so sorry, it was jumped.
So get informed here in CJRC, have those sorts of tutorials here. I know what I was going to ask you. We had at one point the commissioners were poised, ready to go to work with Indiana Institute on Disability and Community to do a jail survey our inmates. It was like $5,000 to do a survey. They have this, professional survey that was used in other countries that they sort of calibrated to us, modified it. Angie and I worked with them. I read the contract. We had the funding ready to go. We didn't do it. Is that something, when you say you want inmate feedback, what do you think about if let's say the world aligns and you become the sheriff of Monroe County in January, would you like to either have the results of that survey? Would you step in the door, or would you like to do that or do you think it's good?
If I was the sheriff, one of the things I would like to do is just take certain steps and assess the situation, what's taking place. I already can tell that we need a new jail because what I'm looking at. I mean, that's just a given.
Yeah.
So obviously, at that given time, we have workers, staff, and the inmates that are in an environment that's not healthy. So I already know that. I already know the answer to that. However, in the future, my experience has been, if you walking around among the inmates, they're not bashful. They're going to tell you, this is lacking, we don't like this, the food, whatever the case may be. Sam's job is to know that response. So do we need someone from outside coming and telling us? I don't think so. What's your opinion?
When Ken Ray came through the jail, within 5 minutes of being in the jail, he said the exact same thing that I've known for years. So, I mean, we're in there every day.
And so another way I'm saying it is, best would know.
We don't know any of this at all. And there's no real, you are separate authorities. There's no real reason to share this information with us.
We'll fix that. If I'm sheriff, we'll make sure that you're aware of what you need to be aware of what's going on. I mean, there's no way we go do our jobs to a certain degree if you're not aware of it. Okay, and all the city councils.
I'm going to play devil's advocate too and say sometimes I think it might be a good idea to have an outside entity looking in and sort of giving you, doing an independent analysis, because what you may, not that you're not telling the truth, but you come from a different perspective. And if you ask the inmates and you get a study, again, if it's $5,000, frankly. I've seen $5,000 wasted on a lot of worse things in county government. But I think that, or city government, no, not county. But I think that an outside entity through doing an objective study, that might not be, throw that out.
I think for the sake of the public, to really proceed with any of this, we need to have the public support. We need to have them behind us, agreeing that it needs to be done, and hopefully agreeing to the direction that we're trying to move in. And the public wants to hear from outside sources. They don't necessarily trust any of us to not be kind of looking at things for our own benefit or whatever.
And from my point of view, if this is what the group wants to do, so be it. In the time frame that I've been meeting with people here in Bloomington, the community, and other people throughout the state, okay, the very specific here in Bloomington. Yes, people are thirsty for information, but once you explain to them, because Sam knows more than all of us at this point, he lives with that every day, he works there. If I have Sam beside me, I'm sitting in front of people who say, listen, this is what we're facing, this is what we do. I want to inform you of what we do. The people here in Bloomington are not bashful. They will push back if need be. But if you want to do that after the fact, then fine. But right now, I just don't understand why when we desperately need a new jail, I mean, that'll come after the fact. If I'm not, hopefully I'm saying it properly. I'm not.
Yeah, Jennifer, and I know Kate too, you want to say something?
I was just gonna say real quick, like I absolutely agree with Lee, in that aspect. And as a new person on the council and thinking of community and talking to community as much as I have been, this is really consuming me because this is really something that I'm passionate about, near and dear, and I think all of us are, or else we wouldn't be here. But I do believe she hit the ball. She like
nail on the head.
Yes, that's what I was looking for. Yes. She definitely said that, because I think in a collaborative effort, and we heard Julie also talk about this too, like transparency is the key to all of this. And if we have to have communities input, we and those that are the professionals and work in this all the time, understand y'all live, eat, breathe this, but there are things that we don't know, I don't know, some of us might not know, that we really truly need to say, if there's nothing, like, if this is what the people want, this is what the people need to, like, invest in this, then we have to have that.
Okay.
It almost sounds like we need to have almost a show and tell from our different offices on what things are like. So maybe we do one or two of those each meeting.
Right,
Okay.
exactly.
And Kate, were you gonna say something else?
I was, but it's 10:06 and
Yeah.
I don't think it's that.
Okay, sounds good. I will type this stuff up. Why don't you guys, I know we want to get going, so I do want you to think about Julie's matrix idea, sort of how to think about this. And we're gonna need to find a new meeting space, which is gonna have to be the Nat-U Hill room, because this room is too small for us. Our Mondays, who can't meet on Mondays at 4:30? Here, is anybody unable, because it would be like perfect if that would work, because the Nat-U Hill room is open
That
every.
would also avoid the judicial conference.
Yes, if we could meet our next meeting, which is the first, we meet the first and third Wednesdays, which would be September 7th and September 21st. The Nat-U Hill room is open from 4:30 to 6, and we can meet there.
So like
Budget hearings are.
Yeah,
well, September 5th is Labor Day as well.
It's September 5th is like September 7th.
Right, but if we're talking about Mondays.
Oh, yeah, duh. Okay, thank you. Okay, so yes, and so do you want to meet here again, September 7th and 21st, and then in October, assuming that the room is available starting in October on Mondays?
I'll just point out that
I think we should discuss Thursdays, because Mondays are so often holidays.
That's a good point.
Okay, yeah, you're right about
They
that.
fall on Mondays as frequently as they can.
And Thursdays were available too, I believe. Thursdays.
Thursday's fine.
You're not free on Thursdays?
No.
Is there
Not the
any
first and third,
not what about
or Not the third.
Okay, so not the first and third. What about the, what if we did second and fourth Thursdays?
Second day is Solid Waste Management District meeting at 4 o'clock in the Nat U Hill room.
What did you say, Julie?
The second.
The second one?
Thursday is the solid waste.
Okay.
Now, what about if you went back to the Mondays and if it's a holiday, it just falls on the next Monday?
That'd be fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we would meet on, Monday, September 12th is our next meeting,
We could meet on the 12th.
and then also on the 19th. That'd be fine.
And then we pick back up on Mondays, the first and third in October.
Yeah.
And if there's a holiday, I like that.
And if it's a Monday holiday, we'll just skip to the next week.
Yeah.
Okay, so the plan will be Mondays, 4:30, Nat Hill room. We're skipping September 7th. We're gonna do.
5.
The 5th, duh. And we're gonna meet on the 12th and the 19th, and then October 1st and 3rd, and then the 1st and 3rd.
Look at that collaboration.
Yeah.
Thank you all very much, because I had to move a whole law school class tonight to be here.
Okay.
And some of them can't make the later time.
Okay.
I was also just gonna point out that October 3rd is the next Community Corrections Advisory Board meeting now. They moved it from the
Right,
31st.
from Halloween.
Just to.
You know what? Wouldn't that be interesting if we did a little field trip in this group?
I have a different word for that.
Right?
That's exhausting.
But just watch, because that's really, they're doing all the same thing. That may be, but we'll see.
Well,
We
they're
might have
gonna
too much work to do.
intercept, yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of field trips,
Yeah.
Hancock County, Hendricks County, Fulton County have all, we can do tours of those facilities at any time.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
And then pretty much anyone in the state
Which counties?
Hancock, Hendrick.
and Fulton. Fulton's a little further away, but-
Bolton is near my hometown.
but they just opened up a new jail. The other two are new jails.
Do it.
And then I think it's sometimes Franklin County, Ohio. could be here.
Yeah, who was that first one? I wrote the name. The first one.
Hendricks,
No, I have Hendricks Bolton.
Hancock.
Hancock. Okay, gotcha. Okay, everybody from home, from virtual land, thank you. We're ending here.
Margie, thank you.
Thank you.